feeling of finality. Closure can come after a funeral, when a person accepts that their family member is in a better place. Closure can come after a relationship has ended, when the heartbroken individuals can finally move on. Closure can come in many different ways, and it is important.
Without closure, people feel as if they are falling into a bottomless well. They keep questioning themselves, what if? This often happens to children whose parents walk out on them. What if I had been a better son or daughter? What if I had convinced mom or dad to stay? Why would they leave me? They never received the closure that they wanted.
This phenomenon is perfectly demonstrated in the book The Other Wes Moore. One Wes Moore's father dies, while the other is simply not in his life. Wes's father died when he was too young to even process it. He had been ill, but the hospital hadn't taken his concerns seriously, and he ended up dying from that illness. He never wanted to abandon his family, leaving his wife to try to take care of the children. But he did. Wes received closure. He knew that his father hadn't left him. His father died. There was nothing that they could have done to save him. He was gone. If the hospital had listened to his concerns, he might have survived, but that would have been the only thing that could have saved him. Wes didn't spend his whole life thinking about what ifs. He knew that his father had died, and that he was too young to do anything about it.
The other Wes never received that closure. His father was never in his life. And when he first met his father was completely drunk. He never received an answer as to why his father left, but he knew one thing for sure, that his father didn't care enough to be sober when meeting his son for the first time. Wes spends most of his childhood trying to figure out why his father wasn't in his life, and why his half-brother's father was. It must have wrecked his young mind trying to figure out what he had done wrong to make his father dislike him. This could have led him to not focus on his studies and to start to sell drugs. If he had already started his life feeling as if he wasn't good enough, then what's there to stop him from thinking that forever? He never saw himself getting out of Maryland or becoming successful in school, so why would he continue to be hopeful?
Nikki is a perfect mixture to compare both Wes and other Wes's father situations. She had a good stepfather with Wes's birth father, but she had a birth father who was never truly in her life. Then, when Wesley died, Bill gave up. There was no more competition in his mind. He had won simply by staying alive. Bill was the abusive man who had hurt her mom and who had bothered her. He was determined to worm his way into her life. When Wesley came around, he probably just wanted to date her mother again. Although he seemed to always be in a who's the best father competition, but only monetarily. He was never actually there for Nikki as a father. That day, Nikki not only lost the only man who had cared about her, but she also lost her birth father. He didn't care about her anymore, and Nikki didn't know why. Nikki didn't know why her father had chosen to abandon them in their time of need. She was grieving too, but she wasn't Wesley's real daughter. She was also the oldest, so she had to be strong for her mother. She probably constantly asked herself, why didn't my dad stay? She could have even blamed herself, thinking that if she were a better daughter, her dad would have stayed. We don't see much about Nikki at the end of the novel. Nikki just fades out of the story once Wes goes to military school, but she is important. How did it affect her in the long run, losing two fathers in one day? Did she become a teenage mother? Or did she lose herself in the drug-ridden Brooklyn? How did the lack of closure affect her? Then, after Wes loses his father, he receives two grandparents. Both of those grandparents step into his life as parenting figures. His grandfather becomes his father, and his grandmother became like a second mother. Joy, Wes's mother, had the full support of her family. This was how she was able to send Wes to military school. Wes didn't suffer from having to constantly feel as if he only had half a family. Wes had a pretty good childhood, considering that his mom was technically a single mom. Without those grandparents stepping in, Joy would have been on her own, trying to raise 3 children. She probably would have been able to do it, but it definitely would have been the most difficult things that she would ever have to try to do. She would have never had the money to be able to put Wes back on the right path once he had gone astray. Even with these role models in his life, Wes was unable to ignore the negativity in his neighborhood. But without these role models, he might have never been able to escape from it.
Mary, other Wes's mother, had already lost her mother at the start of the novel. Her father was also an alcoholic. She did not have any sort of support group, and she surely did not have anyone providing her with monetary support. When both her boyfriends left her, that was it. She had no way out. Wes grew up without a father figure. He didn't try to latch onto any of the men working at his school, and all the males in his life had left him, all except for his brother, Tony. Tony was no role model. He was a drug dealer. He didn't want his little brother getting into that life, and he did everything to stop his little brother from getting into it. But he was unwilling himself to get out of that lifestyle. Wes automatically looked up to him as a father of sorts. He wanted to do everything his brother was doing. Nothing Tony said would be able to dissuade him from being a drug dealer. It was easy money, and he had already seen his brother doing it.
If Wes Moore had not lost his father at a very young age, his life wouldn't have taken the same path that it had. He wouldn't have been able to get away with as much as his parents allowed him to do. They did not watch him as much as his father would have if he were there. His mother would have been able to spend more time with her children rather than spending most of her time at work because their father could help provide income. They probably wouldn't have moved in with the grandparents due to the struggling because he would have been there to help.
If the other Wes Moore's father was still there, his life wouldn't have changed that much. Unlike the author, Wes Moore's father was a drunk and a drug addict, and would have been unable to provide a second income for his family. He would have brought the influence of drugs into the house earlier in Wes's life. While Wes would have seen the negatives of the drugs up close, he would not have cared because he wouldn't be the one doing the drugs. He would be the one making money off of the people not wise enough to stay off of them.
By the end of the novel, it is clear that closure, and lack thereof, affected the outcomes of the 2 Wes Moore's lives and experiences. Closure. Why is she laughing?
Okay, go.
Justin, I swear to God, I'll break your throat. Watch. Because once I start smiling, it doesn't go away.
Wait.
The laugh that you make is like yours.
Okay, let's go.
He receives 2 grandparents. Those grandparents. Closure.
Closure.
I can't speak English. Family member is in a better place. Closure can come after a relationship has ended. I swear to God, Kathleen.
Okay. Again. So a lot of us laugh. Wait, they're so often. Okay.
I know. What? No. I thought that was the end of the sentence. Then I looked back at the paper. It's like, your father died. I'm like, oh, right. lost his father at a very young age, his path would... Father again, his life would have to be his path. And then spending most of her time at work because her father... What?
That's her puzzle. Okay, that's my part. Wes spends most of his childhood trying to figure. Should I start again?
Yeah. I was like, I was hoping we both made that kind of like.
Brothers Wes. Wes spends most of his childhood trying to figure out why his father had left him and why he.
Getting to that part of the night.
Okay. Could have led him to. Okay. Started.
She looked at me and sent the paper and just stopped.
Focus for a second.
See, I'll look
Okay.
at Morgan and then I'm like, I can't.
Outside of going out.
I hated that, you know why? Because I look at Morgan like looking behind the script. Like to look, she's like, and she did that face, you were like,
Okay.
Morgan.
We can do this. Okay.
Nikki is the perfect mixture to compare both Wes and other Wes's.
Did it just go out of focus and then right back in? That's so annoying.
Nikki is the perfect mixture of what? Okay.
Squirrel.
Okay, that's actually what's going on in my head 99% of the time. English, sir. Then, after Wes loses his father, he receives two grandparents. Those grandparents just like I could have kept going.
I didn't like that. Like, I felt like I yelled. He was a drug dealer.
Indeed, he was.
He was a drug dealer.
Old Tony, very young age, his path would as their father could help provide. No, that's just like takes away the whole meaning. I thought I could save it. I thought I could save it. I couldn't.
If the other Wes's oh my god. Mom, what? Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.